It's 2020 and the PS Vita is still one of my favorite handhelds ever made. Yes, even over something like the Nintendo Switch. Even with Sony cutting support for this very early into its life cycle, I still look at this console as something very much worth owning. Today, I wanted to go over the software, the hardware, and accessories for this console if you're thinking about collecting for it in the year 2020, and hopefully this guide will help you understand a little bit more about the PS Vita since a lot has changed in the past couple of years when it comes to collecting for it. And with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the PlayStation Vita. Hi again. So, this little console here, the PS Vita, is a very underrated system, I think, still. It's still really nice to collect for, and it's honestly, I think, my favorite thing to collect for. Now, I had to put a couple disclaimers out there before I get this started here. See, the PS Vita is not a cheap system to collect for. Some of the games are still pretty expensive, with I think the most expensive one being the collector's edition of Hyperdimension Neptunia. Or is it Mega Dimension Neptunia Rebirth 1? Well, we'll get into the games in a little bit, but another disclaimer out there is that memory cards for this thing are very expensive. I have an 8GB memory card here. Let me just go ahead and get that. I have an 8GB memory card here that sadly, I can get that in focus. Looks like it won't focus. But I have an 8GB memory here that's sadly corrupted. It is very important that memory cards like this that are this expensive, this being I think, well, it was actually bundled for me in the Borderlands 2 bundle for this PS Vita that I actually got. Pretty sure last time I checked it was $30 for this 8GB one. Don't know what it's at right now, but the 64GB memory card that I have in this system cost me around $120, so that should give you an idea as to how expensive these things are. That was brand new too, so I don't know if it's cheaper if you try and get it used, and I don't know if I would recommend getting it used because you're kind of winging at that point if you're trying to get a used memory card. There are other alternatives out there to memory in this system. I know there are ways to hack this, which, by the way, I'm not going to go over any homebrew here, because, well, homebrew is, I think, one of the main things keeping the Vita alive as much as it can. I'm not someone that's into homebrew that much. I just like keeping my stuff really vanilla. I'll probably get into it in the future, but right now I have the system completely vanilla, just out of the box, just nothing done to it. I use it a lot, but I've never actually tried to do homebrew, even though it's caught my eye from time to time. Another disclaimer I have to put out there is that there are two different kinds of systems. This is the PS Vita 2000, which is the slim model. The slim model, and this has a vinyl skin, by the way, so no, this is not a special edition, it's just the skin that I bought for it from, I think, Decal Girl. The 2000 model is different from the 1000 model in that the 1000 model, which is the one I originally had an OLED screen. Well, this one just has a regular LCD screen. What's the difference? Well, the OLED one has way better colors. It just, I think, looks in general way better. And this one, while it's not bad, the OLED one does look really nice. Now, I did have a OLED one, a 1000 model. The problem is that the screen does deteriorate over time, and sadly that's what happened to my original OLED. It's the one I bought to play Persona 4 on. This one is the one that came bundled with Borderlands 2. And what are the other differences? Let's see. Another difference is that the 2000 model has a better battery. From what I remember, it was maybe an hour or so more of battery, maybe a little bit less. I mean, this thing is kind of old at this point, several years old, so, I mean, it's never died on me while playing, so that's good. But it is another thing to note that when you're picking between OLED and a 1000 model and a 2000 model is that the screens are pretty different, battery are pretty different, and the actual form factor itself is pretty different. This is a very slim system, the 2000 model is, while the 1000 model is a little bit more chunkier. It's a little bit heavier too. So if you have bigger hands like I do, this might be a little bit uncomfortable after a while, but honestly you can say that for any handheld. And well, I don't really have any complaints for this because the games I play with this aren't too taxing or actually demand me to hold my hands in weird positions around it all the time. So yeah, this isn't too bad. I still recommend it. Alright, so that was actually the hardware. I think that's everything, or at least the important stuff. This is Muramasa Rebirth playing in the background, and we'll talk about the games in a little bit here, but I did want to mention the one hardware that I'm not going to mention in this video besides this. The PlayStation TV, or the PS Vita TV, as it's known in other countries. The reason why I'm not going to talk about that is because, well, I'm primarily a handheld owner, and I do have a PlayStation TV. The problem is that they're too expensive for what they're worth, and I think they're more of a collector's item. Now, you may want to just play a couple PS Vita games on your TV, and that's it, and that's completely fine. But personally, I don't feel comfortable talking about something I just don't collect for. I have it completely new in box, but I just figured that it's better to talk about the system that I actually collect for and I actually use on a day-to-day basis instead of the one that I don't really use a lot and I don't even recommend to collect for anyways. Alright, so I'm gonna go over a couple games here from a couple different genres that I recommend that every PS Vita owner or every newer PS Vita owner should play or collect to get started with the system. As we go over some of these games, I'm going to feature hopefully the price somewhere up here, along with a video or a trailer in the background. And to avoid spoilers for a lot of these games, because I really think that a lot of the PS Vita games that I'm going to talk about have, they're JRPGs, they're Japanese games. A lot of them are very story focused. And that's just, I think, the whole theme of the PS Vita here, that it's supported very well by Japanese studios, not Western ones like the Sony first-party studios. And a lot of these games are JRPGs, like I said before, and I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. Visual novels too, I don't want to spoil anything. So if you see that I'm just leaving like a start screen in the background with a video of a trailer, that's why. I don't want to spoil anything. That's the best I can do at this point, so you know, you guys don't get spoiled by it again. So let's go over the games. So first off, for visual novels, I got Trigger Happy Havoc Danganronpa, or just the Danganronpa franchise. Now, these games are in a weird situation where they're going to get delisted from PSN, and we don't know if they're going to be relisted, so hopefully by the time this video goes up, there are still a couple available digitally. If not, physical is always available, but it's not going to be cheap. But yeah, these are very good visual novels about murders and mysteries, and about going to trial with some of the characters and trying to find out who the culprit is. So a very good set of games that I recommend for anyone looking to collect for the Vita, and I think these games are some of the better ones to get into if you're not into visual novels already. So that's my first recommendation. Another game in the same genre that I recommend is Virtue's Last Reward. This one is a little bit darker. You have to escape this life and death game with a couple other characters, and from what I remember, there are 22 different endings. It's also on the mature side, like I said before, a little bit darker. Very long if you try to replay this all the way through, because I know you can get through one or two playthroughs in just a couple hours, but again, with 22 endings, you're going to be busy for quite a bit. So this one's another good recommendation for visual novel aficionados. So next up here, I've got Persona 4 Golden, a re-release of the PlayStation 2 game Persona 4, with new content, new characters, I think some new music. This is one of those few games that I know that people that don't play JRPGs play to get into the genre. It's a pretty traditional dungeon crawler, turn-based RPG with a visual novel side, and it's probably one of the best games on the Vita, I'd say. It's one of my favorite ones of all time, and I recommend this for anyone collecting for it, and it's probably a day one pickup for basically anyone looking to collect for the system. Next up here, I've got Child of Light. This is another RPG. This is a Western one though by Ubisoft, and it's a little bit different from a regular RPG since the battles are turn-based, but it's all on a timeline where you can slow down opponents by shining a light in front of their face, and you can use that to your advantage by attacking first, delaying their attacks, and repeating this pattern until you're able to defeat the enemy. It's very good in the soundtrack department. It has some very good visuals, and it's another one of my favorite games of all time. Even though it's not too hard, it's even on the hardest difficulty, I had no trouble getting through this. So this is something that I recommend for people that don't usually play RPGs either to get into the genre. It's again pretty good visually, has good soundtrack, has no voice acting, but the text is all one big poem. Or well, it all just rhymes, which is an interesting way to make the story progress. Since everything rhymes, you can get some pretty funny moments, and you meet some pretty interesting characters along the way. So this is another good RPG I recommend for everyone out there. Up next, I've got Muramasa Rebirth by Vanillaware. This is a 2D action game where you play as ninjas in feudal Japan, and you battle some mythological Japanese creatures. And it's a pretty intense game. It can be pretty challenging at times. Vanillaware does some very good stuff, and this is just one of the few games that they have. But even though people recommend Dragon's Crown over this one sometimes, I still prefer Muramasa Rebirth. But Dragon's Crown is also a very good 2D action game. So next, I've got some action games, starting with Uncharted Golden Abyss, which was a launch title for the Vita, and it still holds up pretty well today. There are some annoying touch stuff they had to get through, but besides that, there really isn't anything wrong with it. It's everything you'd expect from a portable Uncharted game, honestly, and it's also a self-contained story, so there's no need to really know much about Uncharted before this. But if you're already familiar with the franchise, this definitely is a nice little add-on to add to your collection. Okay, so Freedom Wars. This one's a little bit interesting. It's a Monster Hunter clone, but it's not really at the same time. It's a lot less of a Monster Hunter clone than God Eater is, and that's also on this system, but Freedom Wars I think is the superior game. Mostly because the online is still very active, and it's one of the few games where I have no issue still going online in 2020 and fighting matches on almost any given day. Still, even alone, the story is pretty fun to get through. I'm pretty sure you can play the whole campaign co-op. I know there are a lot of people out there that are pretty high level, so they can help you get through some stuff. And there are some pretty strong communities around this game, so very good game, and it's another pickup for everyone out there. Next is Gravity Rush. Definitely one of my favorite games on this console. It's pretty interesting and it's pretty unique, where it uses a lot of the sensors on the Vita to be able to play properly. By that I mean the main character named Kat is a young girl that has the power to shift gravity, and you use the motion sensing on the Vita itself to move around and aim, while you can also use some of the touch stuff to like slide on walls and on upside down terrain. And there's some stuff that's mapped to different touch parts of the actual console itself. You'll learn more about it if you do plan on buying this, and it's honestly one of my favorite newer IPs during the Vita era, and it's a fantastic game, another really good one. One of my favorites. I don't find any flaws with it except the performance issues that I have to mention, because this did get a remaster on PS4 and it fixed a lot of those issues. Considering how big this game is at times, and you're gonna be wondering, if you get through this, how is it running all of this? And yeah, it handles it as much as it can. It's still a big recommendation for me though, so hope you guys enjoy that one too. Next, we're going on to one of my favorite genres on this system, and that's rhythm games. You might see here that Project Diva F2 is completely sealed and with a little shrink wrap over it. That's just to keep it safe. I do have this digitally along with Project Diva X and F, and Project Diva F2 is the best in the franchise in my opinion, even though I know that might be a little bit of a controversial opinion. It's a very good, difficult bunch of rhythm games, and I know that this has that save or cross save between this version and the PS3 version, because I don't think F2 got a PS4 release. Could be wrong on that though. But cross save does work on this and the PS3 version if you do have that, and I use it all the time because I don't want to lose progress between either version. And it helps a lot. Works like a Switch. It's a lot more seamless than you might think, because it doesn't take much for it to download the data on any system. So very good games, and I hope I can show you some gameplay here, because there is something that I do have to mention with this one though. Because of how difficult some of the songs do get, it might be a little bit uncomfortable to play this on a tiny portable. And my big hands here are having some issue holding the system while playing. And I know you're supposed to invert your button presses by both hands, but I'm just not used to that yet, so I use one single hand, and it leaves me with hand cramps. So that's probably just me, but it's a good bunch of games that I recommend. So the second rhythm game I'm showing off here is actually a continuation of the story of a previous game, Persona 4 Dancing All Night. It's a direct sequel to Persona 4 Golden, but it's pretty odd because it just doesn't really make sense, if that makes any sense. Persona 4 Dancing All Night is just fun. It shows the characters as they're a little bit older from their Persona 4 Golden counterparts, and it's a little bit different on the rhythm game side because, I mean, I had trouble kind of, matching the button presses with the music because the beats are just a little bit off for me personally. Don't know if that's going to be for everyone. They're not difficult because I had a lot more issues with Project Deal than I ever did with Persona 4 Dancing All Night. Like I said before, it's a continuation of Golden. It's still very good. It has a very big DLC list, so be careful with that. Same with Project Diva that I mentioned earlier. I don't know if I mentioned that for that one either. But I think that the base game itself has a lot of content, so if you're looking for long rhythm games to keep playing for days on end, well, here you go with these two. Next up, I've got a racing game I want to recommend here, and this is Wipeout 2048. Wipeout 2048 is very fun. It's, well, honestly nothing too special. If you've played F-Zero before, or if you're familiar with the Wipeout franchise at all before this, I mean, you should know what you're getting into. Really fast cars, futuristic setting, has its own mechanics, and I'm not too good at this one. I had some difficulty beating a lot of the levels, honestly, and it's just racing fun, arcade racing fun. It has an element of Mario Kart where you do select items at random and you have to shoot them at your enemies, so it has that going for it. And the online for this died a while back, but it's still fun from time to time going on the single player and just going through that at your own pace. So, very good game. Next up is a very unique game, Tearaway. This also did get a remaster on the PS4 like a lot of these Vita games, but Tearaway I think plays the best on the Vita because its charm comes from being able to use the Vita tech to its full advantage. And in this case, you use the back touchscreen to actually put your finger through the actual game, and you interact with the stuff within the game. And for example, there are some dials that you can spin with your finger by touching the back of the thing and being able to spin those dials. It also uses the camera, and you see yourself in the camera, though don't expect a high resolution because the camera is god awful for anything else besides just the in-game stuff, and the in-game stuff is probably the best you'll see being used with the camera. So yeah, Tearaway, fun 3D platformer, and another game that I think plays best on the Vita. Now, let's talk about the digital-only side of the system that I actually wanted to maybe exclude from this video, but seeing as this is a buying guide in general for the system, let's go ahead and talk about it. The PlayStation 1 Classics. You can play a lot of Final Fantasy games on this thing, and I think the only ones that are missing are actually 13 and up. Those games, because I mean there are next generation systems that the Vita just can't do. Right here I have Final Fantasy 9, my favorite Final Fantasy game of all time. It's my favorite in the whole franchise. And I also have Resident Evil 3 and another one here, Persona 3 Portable, which again, this thing does a very good emulation, if that's what it is. It does very good emulation for these systems, and what's bizarre about it is that There are only a couple ways to be able to get some of the PSP games that aren't available on the Vita store. Well, for example here, I know that some people have been looking for the City of Final Fantasy, and it's not directly on the Vita store. You have to actually go onto a PS3 and then look there, because for some reason the PS3 has PSP games you can download onto the PS3 itself and then transfer that over to the to the PS Vita via a cable and the content manager. I know, it's bizarre. I'd say look into that if possible, because there are a lot of games that for some reason just aren't available on the system itself, and you have to actually go onto PS3 and do it that way and transfer through the content manager. It's a bizarre situation, but classic games are available on this. And for those, I mean, just in general, if you know any classic games on the PS1 and PSP, well, the top ones I recommend are Final Fantasy games, Resident Evil games, and Persona 3 Portable. Besides that, I don't know what else is available out there. I recommend you guys go look that up. Maybe put some down in the comments so I can check those out too, because I don't have many digital downloads. So this video is getting close to its end, and before I go, I actually wanted to mention that no, I didn't forget about other games that you see in the background of this whole video and my giant stack of games. There are more that I have, but I couldn't fit them all on the table. So yeah, that's what I could display, I think. I wanted to mention that the PS Vita is still relevant in 2020. It's, again, my favorite handheld of all time, I think. Maybe. Over the Nintendo Switch for sure. Debatable. But it's still fantastic as a portable system. Sadly, I know that Sony didn't support it to the fullest, and I know that it has issues here and there, and I know a lot of the online functionality has been cut. But even then, what it does have is done pretty well. And before I head out, I mean, why did I make a buying guide as a low production value and as simple as this buying guide is in 2020? Well, it's because I know that the last buying guides are several years old at this point, and I just wanted to make something, even if it's just for me and a small group of people, to look into and collect some of these games, because the more time passes, the more these games are going to become unavailable and expensive. And I just wanted something a little bit more updated. I try to include prices as much as possible, but again, the market fluctuates so much, and stuff that costs 40 can cost 100 the next day, or maybe something costs 50 costs less than that the next day. It's a bizarre place to be as a collector for this system, but I still think it's worth it in the end, because there are some unique experiences you can only get on the Vita, even still today. Sadly, there are a lot of exclusive games too, and the reason I say sadly is because they're stuck on this system that limits their potential. And I know a lot of games like Gravity Rush, for example, that got remastered that look way better on that system, and they stop being exclusive to the Vita, but more people get to play them. So hopefully more stuff like that happens, because Persona 4 Golden is another one that left the Vita as an exclusive to PC. And I think that's a very good call, because a lot of these should not be stuck in the system. But anyways, before I head out, I want to make sure that you guys get to see the other games in a montage here that I have ready for this end of this video. So this is where I have to say goodbye, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And also please enjoy the next highlight reel here that I have for the rest of the games I recommend you guys go and check out. Alright, take care. Bye.